Hi folks, welcome back to another JS drop from this dot. In this week's drop, we have Harshil Agrawal from Contentful here to give us an introduction to building a customizable app for Contentful using the Contentful app framework. Remember to like and subscribe for more awesome JavaScript content, and let's get started.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm excited to show you all today how to create an app for Contentful. Now, you might already know what Contentful is, but for the folks who are new to Contentful, let me quickly go through it. Contentful is a modern content management platform with an API-first approach, which means that you can have your team create content, edit, and publish content on Contentful, and you decide where and how you want to display this content, on which platforms you want to display this content. It can be either websites, mobile applications, or even VR applications. So you can use Contentful to manage content for your marketing websites, your e-commerce stores, your knowledge base, basically anything. Also, oftentimes when you're working with content, you might want to bring some external information from different platforms. For example, if you are building an e-commerce site, you might want to bring your product information from, for example, Shopify. Or if you're building a marketing website, you want to bring all your analytics into Contentful itself. Now for this, we already have a couple of apps in our marketplace which you can use out of the box. But you might want to customize the experience for your team, or you might want to integrate it with another service. That's where the app framework comes into the picture. The app framework allows you to create custom experience for your content editing team. You can select how and what is rendered on the content editor for your content editing team. You can also create custom integrations for your own development workflows. Now, enough of talking. I am going to go ahead and start with the code. Now, to create an app for the Contentful platform, you can do create Contentful app, npx, and then create Contentful app, give the name of that application, and then pass on the JavaScript flag. By default, this command would this command would give out a TypeScript project, but because we are interested in JavaScript, passing on the JavaScript flag will give us that boilerplate for the JavaScript code. I already have created an app for you, and I'm going to quickly walk you through that. Now, this is the basic boilerplate for the application. You have the node module directory, which contains all the npm packages, the public directory, and the source directory. Now, within this source directory, we are more interested in the locations part. This is where you go ahead, write your code, and decide how and what you want to do within these locations. Now, talking about locations, I'm going to hit back to the slides and show you a couple of examples and help you understand what locations are. Now, the first location is the entry sidebar. You can use this location to create or replace the widgets. This can be used for showing some contextual information about an entry, or you can provide actions to perform. For example, as you can see on the screen, you can have a Netlify app which would allow you to hit on that build website button and trigger a build on Netlify. Next is the entry field location. Now, this replaces the editing experience for your content team. You can provide a specific input experience for custom data types. You can create product pickers from e-commerce providers, and you can do a lot more. And then there is the entry editor. With this location, you can customize the whole experience of how your team creates the content. You can override the overall editorial experience for your team. Then there is the dialog location. With this, you can have some kind of confirmation or warning messages for your team, or you can also use this to display the list coming in from your e-commerce store. And then the page is one of my favorites because you can create dashboards with this. You can get analytics from your analytics websites and then render it out in Contentful itself. And lastly is the app configuration screen. Now this is what the user sees when they install your application. This is where they would be able to configure the application with their credentials. All right. So we talked about locations and we now have some idea about locations. Let's see an app in action. So for this demo, we are gonna create an app which is gonna fetch some movies from the movie DB, and then we can select that movie and render it out in Contentful. So I'm gonna start the demo application, and while this is running on, let's go ahead to Contentful. Now I already have created an entry in here. Now this entry field is using the app that we have created. I can select a different movie. Let's just do Steve Jobs. I can click on open dialog. This opens the dialog box, gets the information from that API and renders the list over here. I can select whichever movie I want. Let's just say I want to go ahead with this one. And it automatically populates that entry field. Amazing, right? So let's go ahead and try to create it from the scratch. Now, the first thing you want to do is you want to go ahead and click on Manage Apps. This is where you can go ahead and define all the apps that you want to create or install in Contentful. Click then on the Manage App Definitions, and then we will click on the Create an App. Let's give this a name, Research. And we can also host this app on Contentful, but right now, because this is running locally on our machine, let us enter the localhost address. And then you can select which field you want this to work with. Because this is an app that is interacting with the entry field, I'm going to go ahead and select the entry field. And within the entry field, I can select which type of entry it would be. So this is going to be a short text. So I'm going to select that. And everything else looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and click on save. I'm going to save the app. And the next thing I want to do is install it to the space. I am going to select the GS drop space that I have created for this demo, and I'm going to click on continue. All right, our app is now installed. Let's authorize this. Now finally our app is installed. So let's go ahead and create a new content model. Now I already have a movie review content model, so I'm going to go ahead and create a different one. And I'm just going to call it movie data. And this will have a text field, which I'm going to call name. And now we want to associate this with our application that we just created. So click on appearance, and you can then select the GS drop app or the movie search app. I'm just going to select the movie search app, and I'm going to click on confirm. And now if I hit save, this saves my application, this saves my content model, and associates it with the application. So now if I go to content, and if we try to add an entry for movie data, you will see that there is a field and it's already running it. Now, remember, this is happening because we already have a demo application up and running. So let's close the server and move on to our actual app that we want to work on. So if we come back and if we refresh, we won't be seeing any entry field in here now because our app is not running anymore. All right, so the first thing we want to do is we want to work in this entry field, and we want to display a text input, and as well as let's display a button to open the dialog box. So the first thing we are doing is we are importing the button and the text input from Format 360, which is our open source design library. And then we are simply rendering it out over here. Now, if you see over here, we have a value keyword or the value attribute which takes value, and we have an onChange function that would set that value to the value that is entered by the user. So let's go ahead and add this. So now we have the value and set value. And we are using the use field value hook coming in from the Contentful SDK. The next thing is we also have a handle click function in here. So whenever someone clicks on that, we want to open up the dialog box. So for that, let's go ahead and write out the function. So now this handle click function will call the SDK and ask the SDK to open the dialog box. We can pass on various parameters for that. We can define the width for that dialog box. We can tell which parameters we want to pass in that dialog box. And we can also set parameters like what should happen when someone presses an escape key or when someone clicks outside of that dialog box. And lastly, we want to also set the value of that movie title that is written by the dialog box. So if I go ahead and save this, and let's start our demo application, which will now render the text field where the user can enter the name of the movie, and it will also render a button which on click should basically display a dialog, but right now we haven't configured a dialog box, so it would throw an error. If we go back to Contentful and if I refresh this page, we would be now able to see the information. You can see that we got the name and the search button over here. Works pretty well, right? Awesome. So now we have that going in. Let's go ahead and set up our dialog. Now for the dialog, we want to have a function, right, which will basically fetch all the movies from our database and then render it out as a list. So first, go ahead and create a variable called movies and initialize it as an empty array. Next, let's create a function. So we have a fetch movie function, which is basically making an API call to the MovieDB API. We are passing the query that is coming in from the field, and then we are simply returning out the response. Now, one thing to note over here is I have created a credentials.js file. Now, this is just for the demo. It is not encouraged to do this. Just for the purpose of this demo, I have hard-coded my credentials in the credentials.js file. But again, if you are to use this app in real world, you'll have to set up the configure screen and then ask the users to pass on that API key through the configuration screen. All right, now that we have the fetch movie function, let's go ahead and call this function every time the dialog is open, right? So we use the use effect hook, which would call the fetch movie function, and we are passing on the movie name parameter that is again called in from the field location. So if you check over here, we are passing on the parameter called movie name. Wonderful. So this seems to be working in theory. The next thing we want to do is render out the information that is written by this API call. So the first thing we can do is we can load a spinner when the movie when the movie array is empty. Once that array has some information in it, we can simply return it out. Again, we are using the spinner component and the entity list component from the Contentful's format 360 design library. And then we are simply mapping this information and rendering it out on the dialog box. This looks good. I am going to hit save and I am going to go back to the application. Now, if we enter, let's just do jobs, and if I click search, this should give us all the results. And that's what we wanted. So over here, what we did is we created a field which would allow us to enter some information, fetch that information from that API, and allow us to create a picker, and then we can select that information, and then it is saved in the field. All right, so within this 15 minutes, I cannot show you everything around the app framework, but I am excited to see what you do with this. Now, again, with the app framework, you can build applications to customize the experience for your team, and you can also configure the development workflow for your developer teams as well. Now, the app framework uses again Forma 36, which is an open source design system from Contentful, and it also uses the app SDK that is again open sourced. If you don't find an application in the marketplace that you feel you might need, you can simply go ahead and use the app framework to create an app. All right, now if you have any questions around the app framework, you can always reach out to us on our Slack, or you can learn more about this on our developer portal. And if you want to just hit me up on Twitter to talk about Contentful or the app framework or React or JavaScript, just feel free to hit me up on Twitter. Thank you all, and I am looking forward to seeing an app from you.